I'm Carolyn, 32 female. I live in a small, meticulously organized apartment that doubles as my office, my sanctuary, and my battle station. For the past 2 years, I've poured every ounce of my life, savings, and sanity into developing a productivity app called Streamline. It's my dream, my passion, and according to my family, my greatest failure. This story is about how one cruel laugh at a family reunion became the catalyst for unearthing years of hidden betrayal, and how I finally reclaimed my own definition of success. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The dread begins, as it always does, about a week before the annual Vance family reunion. It starts as a low hum of anxiety in the pit of my stomach, a familiar ghost that whispers reminders of past humiliations. This year, the hum was louder than ever. The reunion was being held at my sister Jessica's sprawling new house, a fact she had reminded us of in no less than a dozen emails, each one a masterclass in thinly veiled boasting. The subject line was always some variation of "can't wait to welcome you all." But the body was filled with humble brags about the new Italian marble countertops, the custom-built mahogany deck, and the sheer square footage that screamed success. My life, in stark contrast, was not made of marble or mahogany. It was made of code, caffeine, and ramen noodles. 2 years ago, I'd walked away from a secure, well-paying job as a senior developer at a major tech firm. It was a good job, the kind of job my parents, Robert and Margaret, could proudly mention at dinner parties. Our Carolyn is a computer whiz, my father, a retired history professor, would say, as if I were a precocious child showing off a science fair project. But the corporate world was stifling my creativity. I had an idea, a brilliant one, for an app that could revolutionize how small businesses manage their workflow. So I took the leap. I cashed in my 401k, downsized my life, and became the founder, CEO, and sole employee of my own startup. The first year was brutal. I burned through my savings faster than I anticipated. The initial build of the app was buggy, and a potential investor pulled out at the last minute. To my family, these were not the expected growing pains of a new business. They were glaring, neon signs of failure. Jessica was particularly merciless. During phone calls, she'd adopt a tone of saccharine pity. "Oh, Carolyn, are you still playing with that little computer project of yours?" she'd ask. "David and I were just saying how brave you are to keep trying." David, her real estate developer husband, would just chuckle in the background. My parents would offer unsolicited advice, usually suggesting I apply for my old job back. "There's no shame in admitting it didn't work out, dear," my mother would say, her voice gentle but the words feeling like stones. This year, however, things were different, though they didn't know it yet. For the past 6 months, I'd been working with a small, angel investor who believed in my vision. We'd rebuilt Streamline from the ground up. It was faster, sleeker, and more intuitive. We were in the final stages of beta testing with a dozen small businesses, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. We were on the cusp of a major launch, with a projected user acquisition that made my head spin. I had even secured a second, much larger round of funding that was set to close in a few weeks. But I hadn't told my family any of this. After years of their doubt, I wanted to walk in with the success fully realized, not just the promise of it. I wanted to see their faces when Streamline was a household name. The week before the reunion, my cousin Ben called. He was the only one in the family who got it. A financial analyst himself, he understood the risk and the potential reward. "You ready for the lion's den?" he asked, his voice laced with humor. "Never," I sighed, leaning back in my chair and staring at the lines of code on my screen. I'm half tempted to fake a sudden, debilitating illness. "Don't you dare," he said. "I need a sane person to talk to, otherwise I'll be stuck listening to David explain the nuances of zoning laws for 3 hours. I laughed. "Besides," Ben continued, his tone turning more serious, "don't let them get to you. You're building something amazing. They just don't have the imagination to see it." "Thanks, Ben. I appreciate that." "Just keep your head up." And if Jessica starts in on you, just picture her tripping over one of her ridiculously expensive Persian rugs. His words gave me a sliver of confidence. He was right. Why was I letting them define my journey? My failures were lessons. My struggles were the foundation of my future success. I decided then and there that I wouldn't go to the reunion. Why? My head down, I would go with a smile, secure in the knowledge that my life was about to change in a way they couldn't possibly imagine. I picked out a simple but elegant blue dress, one I'd bought in my corporate days that still fit perfectly. I got my hair done. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of the old, confident Carolyn, the one before the ramen and the self-doubt. On the day of the reunion, I drove to Jessica's house, which was less of a house and more of a small palace in a gated community. Cars lined the circular driveway, Audis, BMWs, a Porsche. It was a physical manifestation of the life Jessica had built, a life designed to impress and intimidate. I took a deep breath before getting out of my sensible, 10-year-old sedan. Just smile, I told myself. Don't let them see they get to you. I walked up the stone pathway, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses growing louder. I plastered a bright, genuine smile on my face, ready to face the lions. Little did I know, the alpha lioness was waiting right by the door, ready to pounce before I even had a chance to step inside. The gathering storm was about to break, and I was standing right in the center of it. Chapter 2: The Calculated Cruelty. The front door of Jessica's house was a massive, dark wood affair that seemed more suited to a medieval castle. It swung open before I could even ring the bell, revealing my sister, Jessica, standing there as if she'd been waiting. She was the picture of effortless perfection in a cream-colored linen jumpsuit, her blonde hair styled in loose, beachy waves. A glass of champagne was held delicately in one hand. Her smile was wide, but it never, ever reached her eyes. That was the first warning sign. "Carolyn, you came," she exclaimed, her voice a pitch too high, designed to carry across the manicured lawn. Heads turned. Aunts, uncles, and cousins paused their conversations to watch the spectacle. It felt less like a greeting and more like an announcement. Of course, I came. It's a family reunion, I said, keeping my own smile firmly in place as I stepped over the threshold into the cavernous, white-marbled foyer. "Well, we just weren't sure," she continued, her eyes doing a slow, deliberate scan of my appearance, from my professionally styled hair down to my sensible flats. It was a dismissal in a single glance. "After everything, all you're well, you know." She waved her hand vaguely, a gesture meant to encompass the entirety of my life choices. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. "It's been a busy year," I said, my voice even, "but I wouldn't miss this." She let out a small, tinkling laugh. "Busy? I love that. It's such a good word for it." She then turned to her husband, David, who was approaching from the living room. He was tall, handsome in a conventional way, and radiated the smug self-assurance of a man who had never failed at anything. He pecked Jessica on the cheek. "Look who decided to grace us with her presence," David said, his grin condescending. He was holding a beer, and he raised it in a mock toast. "To the entrepreneur, still grinding away in that little apartment, are we?" "Something like that," I replied, my jaw tightening. I could feel the eyes of my extended family on me. They were listening, waiting. The annual "Let's See What Carolyn's Done Wrong This Year" show was officially underway. I tried to pivot. "The house is beautiful, Jess. You've both done an incredible job." It was a genuine compliment, an olive branch. Jessica's smile widened, this time with a glint of triumph. "Oh, thank you. It's been a lot of work, of course. Closing the deal on this place was a nightmare, but David is just a miracle worker. And my promotion to marketing director came with a lovely bonus that helped with the down payment." Every word was a carefully sharpened dart. I have the perfect house. I have the perfect husband. I have the perfect job. What do you have, Carolyn? Before I could formulate a response that wasn't dripping with sarcasm, she delivered the killing blow. She leaned in, as if sharing a secret, but her voice was loud enough for everyone in the foyer and the adjacent living room to hear. "Honestly, Carolyn," she said, her tone dripping with false concern. "We didn't think you'd show your face after all your failures." The words hung in the air for a moment, thick and poisonous. And then the laughter started. It wasn't a roar, it was worse. It was a collection of snickers and chuckles from my aunts, my uncles, even David. My own father, standing by the fireplace, just cleared his throat and looked down at his shoes. My mother gave a weak, apologetic smile from across the room, as if to say, "Oh, that's just Jessica being Jessica." No one defended me. No one told her she'd gone too far. Their silence was an endorsement. The laughter cut deeper than any knife. It was a symphony of my worst fears, a public confirmation of every doubt I'd ever had about myself. My smile, the one I had practiced in the car, faltered and then crumbled completely. In that instant, every success I was on the verge of achieving felt like nothing. The funding, the positive beta tests, the sleek new app, it all evaporated in the heat of their collective mockery. All they saw was the girl who quit her good job to chase a silly dream. The failure. My sister watched my face, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. She had achieved her goal. She had asserted her dominance, reminded everyone of her place at the top of the family hierarchy and mine at the bottom. She had taken my attempt at quiet dignity and smashed it on her marble floor. I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. The hurt was still there, a raw, open wound, but something else was crystallizing beneath it. Rage. A pure, unadulterated anger that was sharper and clearer than any emotion I had felt in years. I looked at her smug, smiling face, at David's condescending grin, at the passive, complicit faces of my family. And in that moment, I knew that I was done. I was done seeking their approval. I was done being their cautionary tale. And I knew, with absolute certainty, whose smile I would be erasing first. I didn't say a word. I simply turned around, walked out the massive front door, and didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. The anger was a fire in my chest, burning away the hurt and leaving something hard and resolute in its place. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't cry. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up a file I had labeled Phase 2 Launch Strategy. I stared at it for a long time. Then I created a new folder. I named it Reckoning. The game had changed. They thought they had broken me, but they had just given me a new, more powerful motivation. Chapter 3: The Seeds of Doubt. The days following the reunion were a strange mixture of focused productivity and simmering rage. I channeled every ounce of the humiliation I felt into my work. I coded for 16 hours a day, fueled by coffee and a burning desire for retribution. The app, Streamline, became my obsession in a way it hadn't been before. It was no longer just a business venture. It was my vindication on a server. During this period of intense work, I barely spoke to my family. My mother, Margaret, called twice, leaving voicemails filled with platitudes. "Hi, honey, just calling to see if you're okay. Jessica has such a sharp sense of humor, you know not to take her seriously." I deleted them both without a second thought. My father didn't call at all. The incident at the reunion had replayed in my mind 1,000 times, but one detail kept snagging my attention: Jessica's specific choice of words. "All your failures," plural. It was the "all" that bothered me. Yes, my startup had faced setbacks, which I had been open about. There was the initial buggy launch and the investor who backed out. But were there others I didn't know about? It felt like she was alluding to a longer, more comprehensive list of my shortcomings, a list I hadn't authored. A week later, Ben called. He hadn't been at the front door for the main event, but he'd heard the aftermath. "I am so sorry, Carolyn," he said, his voice full of genuine remorse. "I was in the backyard with Uncle Robert. By the time I came inside, you were gone. Jessica is unbelievable." "It's fine, Ben. It was nothing I haven't heard before," I lied, trying to sound unaffected. "No, it's not fine. It was cruel. And the way everyone just let it happen," he trailed off, disgusted. "Anyway, I'm calling for 2 reasons. 1, to make sure you're okay. 2, something weird happened later that night." I sat up straighter. "Weird how?" "Well, after you left, Jessica was holding court, of course. She and David were talking about their new condo investment downtown. I was talking to a friend of David's, a guy named Alistair, who's in venture capital. Just making conversation, you know? I mentioned that my cousin was also in the tech startup space, working on a cool productivity app. A cold feeling crept up my spine, and Alistair gets this strange look on his face. He asks who my cousin is. I say your name, Carolyn Vance. He immediately knew who you were. He said, "Oh, the Streamline app. Yeah, we looked at that one. Too bad about the security flaws." I froze, my hand tightening on the phone. What security flaws? My code is clean. We had it audited by a third-party firm. That's what I thought, Ben said, his voice rising with indignation. I told him that and he just shrugged. He said, "Well, that's not what we heard. We got an anonymous tip from an industry insider that the backend was a mess, full of vulnerabilities. We can't take a risk on something like that." Carolyn, that was the firm you were supposed to meet with 6 months ago, right? The one that canceled on you out of the blue. The world tilted on it. S-Axis. The firm, a prestigious VC group called Northgate Ventures, had been incredibly enthusiastic about Streamline. We had 3 positive preliminary meetings. They had the term sheet practically written. Then, a day before our final pitch, I got a curt email from a junior associate. "After further internal review, we've decided not to move forward. We wish you the best of luck." No explanation, no feedback, just a closed door. I had chalked it up to the volatile nature of venture capital. I'd told myself they probably found a more promising investment. I never once suspected sabotage. "An anonymous tip," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Who would do that?" The question hung in the air, but we both knew the likely answer. It was too much of a coincidence. Jessica worked in marketing. She knew people. She was well connected in the corporate world, and her circles often intersected with the finance and tech scenes through her husband, David. But would she really go that far? Sabotaging my funding, my one real shot at success, just to maintain her position as the golden child? The idea was monstrous, almost unbelievable. Almost. I remembered a conversation from a year ago. I had been ecstatic after my first meeting with Northgate and had made the mistake of sharing the good news with my mother, who had undoubtedly passed it on to Jessica. I could almost hear Jessica's voice on our next call. "Venture capital? Isn't that terribly risky? You have to be so careful who you trust with your ideas, Carolyn. The corporate world is full of sharks." At the time, I thought it was her usual condescending brand of advice. Now, her words sounded like a threat. After I hung up with Ben, I sat in silence for a full hour, my mind racing. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing into a monstrous tree of suspicion. The humiliation at the reunion wasn't just a spontaneous act of cruelty. It was a calculated move by someone who believed she had already crippled me behind the scenes. She was mocking me for failures she herself had engineered. The laughter I heard that day took on a new, more sinister tone in my memory. It wasn't just derision, it was the sound of victory, her victory. The rage I felt before was nothing compared to this. This was a cold, hard certainty. My sister, my own flesh and blood, had not just watched me struggle, she had actively, secretly, and maliciously ensured it. She hadn't just kicked me when I was down, she dug the hole I was in. My new folder, Reckoning, suddenly felt insufficient. This wasn't just about getting even anymore. This was about exposing a truth so ugly it would shatter the perfect, marble and mahogany world my sister had so carefully constructed. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof, and I was going to get it. The investigation had begun. Chapter 4: A Pattern of Sabotage. The hunt for proof became my singular focus. Launch preparations for Streamline were still my priority during the day, but my nights were dedicated to digging into Jessica's life, searching for a thread, any thread, that would connect her to Northgate Ventures. I felt like a detective in a thriller, piecing together a puzzle of betrayal. My first move was to leverage the only resource I had, my tech skills. It felt slightly illicit, but I rationalized that Jessica had thrown the rulebook out the window long ago. I started with social media forensics. Jessica and David lived their lives online, curating a perfect image on every platform. I scrolled back through months of their posts, looking for connections to Northgate. It was tedious, but after 2 nights of searching, I found it. A tagged photo from a charity gala 6 months ago, the same week Northgate had ghosted me. There was Jessica, drink in hand, smiling next to a group of people. I clicked on the tags. One of them was Alastair Finch, the VC Ben had spoken to. Another was a man named Julian Croft. A quick search confirmed my fears. Julian Croft was a senior partner at Northgate Ventures. They weren't just acquaintances, they seemed friendly. In another photo from the same event, Jessica and Julian were deep in conversation, leaning in to hear each other over the noise of the party. The date stamp on the photo was 2 days before my final meeting was canceled. It was circumstantial, but it was a concrete link. She had access. Next, I needed to know if she had a motive beyond simple sibling rivalry. My sister always valued status and money above all else. Could my potential success have threatened her in some tangible way? Ben, my loyal cousin and financial analyst, helped me with the next piece. He was a wizard at navigating the often opaque world of finance and investments. "This is probably a long shot," I said over a secure video call, "but can you look into my parents' estate planning? I know it's morbid, but I have a feeling this is about more than just bragging rights." Ben looked hesitant. "That's getting int." "Oh, murky territory, Carolyn." "I know, but Jessica's always been weird about inheritance, even when we were kids. Remember how she'd claim grandma's jewelry? Just trust me on this. See what you can find discreetly." A few days later, Ben called back, his voice low and serious. "You were right. I have a friend who works in estate law. I called in a big favor, and he was able to look up some public records and give me some insight. Your parents updated their will about 18 months ago. That was shortly after I'd quit my job to start my company." "Okay, and it's not split down the middle anymore," Ben said grimly. "They structured it with a clause. It's a bit archaic, but basically, the distribution of assets is weighted based on each child's financial stability at the time of their passing. The lion's share, including the family home and the investment portfolio, goes to the more secure daughter. The other daughter gets a much smaller fixed cash sum. The idea is to protect the family legacy by entrusting it to the one who has proven more responsible." I was stunned into silence. It was a betrayal on a level I couldn't comprehend. My parents, the retired professor and the librarian, had essentially written a survival of the fittest clause into their will. They had created a financial death match between their own children. "So if I succeed," I started. "If you succeed, you challenge Jessica's status as the secure one," Ben finished. "If your company takes off, you could potentially be worth far more than her and David. You'd get the house, the portfolio, everything. Her entire inheritance is contingent on you failing." Suddenly, it all made sense. The constant undermining, the public humiliations, the saccharine pity. It was all a campaign to reinforce the narrative that I was the irresponsible, flighty dreamer, and she was the stable, successful anchor of the family. The sabotage of my funding wasn't just an act of jealousy, it was a calculated financial strategy. She wasn't just trying to win a sibling rivalry, she was trying to secure a multi-million-dollar inheritance. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. I was trying to find more connections between Jessica and Julian Croft. I ran a deep search on their names together and stumbled upon an online newsletter for a local alumni association. There was a brief mention of them serving on the same fundraising committee for their business school a few years back. The newsletter included a personal email address for Julian. It was a long shot, a desperate Hail Mary, but I had to take it. I drafted the email carefully. I introduced myself as the founder of Streamline and mentioned that I was aware his firm had passed on us. I explained that I had since secured new funding and was preparing for a major launch, but that I had recently heard a disturbing rumor about an anonymous tip regarding security flaws. I wrote that I had third-party audits proving the app's security and that I was deeply concerned that a malicious rumor may have influenced their decision. I kept the tone professional and non-accusatory. I was just a founder doing her due diligence. I asked if he would be willing to shed any light on the matter in the interest of professional integrity. I didn't mention Jessica at all. I hit send, my heart pounding, expecting no reply. To my astonishment, he responded less than an hour later. The email was short and cautious. Ms. Vance, your email is concerning. Our decisions are based on a wide range of factors. However, the integrity of our review process is paramount. I am not at liberty to discuss the specifics of an anonymous source, but I will say this. The information we received did not come from a tech industry insider. It came from a personal contact who framed it as a family concern, suggesting they were worried you were in over your head with a flawed product. Given your claims, I will be re-examining the information provided. We take misrepresentation very seriously. I read the email 3 times. A personal contact. A family concern. It was a confession, gift-wrapped and delivered to my inbox. Jessica had used her personal connection with Julian Croft, masquerading her sabotage as familial concern. She had painted herself as the worried older sister trying to save a naive sibling from public failure, all while methodically engineering that very failure. I now had the motive, the means, and the confirmation. It wasn't just one incident. It was a clear pattern of sabotage, driven by the ugliest combination of greed and jealousy. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the proof on my screen. The anger was gone, replaced by an icy resolve. Jessica wanted to play the game of success and failure? Fine, I would play, but I would be the one making the rules from now on. Chapter 5, Architect of the Reckoning. With the truth laid bare, my mission became crystal clear. S was no longer about a simple confrontation. That would be too easy, too forgettable. Jessica's betrayal was a complex, calculated construction of lies. My response had to be equally architectural. I would not just tear her world down, I would use her own tools, ambition, public perception, and financial leverage to dismantle it piece by piece, in front of the very audience she sought to impress. The stage for this revelation would be my parents' 40th wedding anniversary party, a month away. It was the perfect venue. A mandatory family event, filled with the same people who had laughed at me, celebrating the 2 people whose bias will had set this entire tragedy in motion. My plan had 2 primary pillars: professional triumph and personal exposure. The first pillar was streamline. My new investors were a dynamic duo, a pair of tech veterans who valued aggressive marketing. The official launch was scheduled for the week before the anniversary party. I worked with my investors to craft a launch strategy that was anything but quiet. We targeted tech blogs, industry publications, and business journalists. We prepared a sleek, compelling press kit that highlighted not only the app's features, but also my personal story as a solo female founder who walked away from a safe corporate job to build her dream. It was the exact kind of narrative the media loved. I poured my energy into making the launch an undeniable, headline-grabbing success. I rehearsed my talking points, refined the app's presentation, and ensured every detail was perfect. This was my offensive move. The second pillar was the trap for Jessica. This part required a more delicate touch. I needed to lure her into a position where her greed and arrogance would make her expose herself. Through Ben's discreet inquiries, I knew that Jessica and David were trying to secure financing for a massive new real estate project, a luxury condo development that was meant to be their magnum opus. They were courting a private equity firm called Blackwood Capital, a notoriously conservative and old-school institution that prized reputation and family values almost as much as profit margins. My plan began to take shape. I used a small portion of my new funding to hire a private investigator, not to dig up dirt on Jessica, but to find a clean, untraceable way to get information to Blackwood Capital. The PI found what I needed: a junior partner at the firm who was ambitious and known to be receptive to well-placed information that could give him an edge. The next step was to create the perfect bait. I scheduled a call with my parents a week before their party. I was intentionally vague but upbeat. "Things are really turning around with the business," I told them, knowing the news would travel directly to Jessica. "I'm finally seeing all the hard work pay off. In fact, I'm thinking of making a significant investment myself soon. something solid to diversify. This was the hook. As I expected, Jessica called me 2 days later, her voice oozing with false sweetness. "Carolyn, Mom told me your little project is finally making some money. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Jess," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "She mentioned you were thinking of investing. David and I have the most amazing opportunity right now, our new condo development. The buy-in for early investors is high, but the returns are going to be astronomical. We might be able to get you in on the family and friends round. I'm only offering because I want to see you make some smart financial moves and secure your future." The condescension was thick, but underneath it, I could hear her true motive. She wanted my money to help fund her project, a deliciously ironic twist. "I don't know, Jessica," I said, feigning hesitation. "It's a lot of money." "Don't worry your pretty little head about the details," she said smoothly. "I'll handle everything. I'll even talk to our partners at Blackwood Capital and let them know my sister is joining us. They love to see that kind of family solidarity. It makes the investment look stronger." Checkmate, she had taken the bait completely. She was going to personally vouch for me to the very firm I was about to torpedo her with. The week of the launch was a whirlwind. The story went live on a major tech news site, and from there, it exploded. From corporate burnout to startup success, how Carolyn Vance built Streamline. The angle was perfect. The app received rave reviews for its design and functionality. Downloads soared. My phone didn't stop ringing with interview requests. By the end of the week, Streamline was the #1 productivity app in the country, and our user base had surpassed our 6-month projection in just 5 days. I was no longer the family failure. I was a tech industry success story. The day before the anniversary party, my PI made the move. He arranged for a package to be delivered to the junior partner at Blackwood Capital. It was an anonymous tip, much like the one Jessica had used against me. The package contained a simple, clean file. Inside was a copy of Julian Croft's email, a printout of the alumni newsletter showing his connection to Jessica, and a concise, professionally written memo detailing a pattern of behavior. How Jessica Vance had engaged in corporate sabotage against a family member for financial gain related to a disputed inheritance. The memo suggested that such unethical behavior might pose a significant reputational risk to any firm that partnered with her. It was all factual, all provable, and utterly devastating. I wasn't telling them not to invest. I was simply giving them information and letting them draw their own conclusions. The stage was now set. My professional success was public knowledge. The seed of Jessica's downfall had been planted in the very soil she was trying to cultivate. All that was left was the final act, which would take place at my parents' anniversary celebration. I had my toast prepared. It wasn't going to be a screaming match or a tearful confrontation. It would be a quiet, elegant execution. I was the architect of this reckoning, and the foundation of my sister's world was about to crumble. Chapter 6: A Toast to the Truth. The anniversary party was held at a classic upscale restaurant my parents had loved for years. The private room was filled with familiar faces, the same aunts, uncles, and cousins from the reunion. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. As I walked in, conversations didn't stop, they shifted. People looked at me with a new kind of curiosity, a grudging respect. My recent success had been the talk of the family all week. I found Jessica holding a glass of wine, talking to our father. She saw me and her face tightened for a fraction of a second before her perfect hostess smile clicked into place. "Carolyn, there's the woman of the hour," she said, her voice loud and performative. "We are all just so incredibly thrilled for you." "Thank you," I said calmly, meeting her gaze. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, not pride, but a complicated mix of annoyance and calculation. My success had disrupted her narrative, but she was already spinning it to her advantage. She was now the proud, supportive sister of the tech genius. David clapped me on the shoulder. "Knew you had it in you all along," he said with a grin that didn't fool anyone. I just smiled back. The dinner was pleasant on the surface, but filled with a tense undercurrent. My father, Robert, who had once dismissed my work as a hobby, now asked me pointed questions about user acquisition costs and server scalability. My mother kept telling everyone, I always knew she had a brilliant mind. The revisionist history was in full swing. Finally, the time for toasts arrived. My father gave a lovely, heartfelt speech about his 40 years with my mother. Then, Jessica stood up, glass in hand. She gave a flawless tribute to our parents, then smoothly transitioned. And I also want to give a special toast, she announced, turning to me. To my sister, Carolyn, she has taught us all a lesson in perseverance. Despite so many setbacks and failures, she never gave up on her little dream, and now it's become this incredible success. We are so proud. The room erupted in applause. It was a masterful performance. She was co-opting my success, painting herself as the gracious older sister who had always believed in me, even during the failures she had manufactured. She was trying to erase the memory of her cruelty at the reunion, but she didn't know that I had a different version of the story to tell. When she sat down, I stood up. A hush fell over the room. I'd like to make a toast as well, I began, my voice clear and steady. I raised my glass. First, to Mom and Dad, happy 40th anniversary. Your marriage has always been an example of enduring partnership. I smiled at them and they beamed back. I also want to toast to the theme of family, I continued, my eyes sweeping across the room before landing on Jessica. Family is a complicated thing. It can be your greatest source of support, but it can also be the source of your greatest challenges. This past year, as I was building my company, I learned a lot about both. Jessica's smile was still plastered on her face, but her eyes were wary. I want to publicly thank my sister, I said, and a few people looked surprised. Jessica, you have been, without a doubt, the single biggest motivation for my success. Her smile widened. This was what she wanted to hear. You see, I went on, my voice never rising, when an anonymous family source contacted my first potential investors, Northgate Ventures, and lied about my app having security flaws to scare them away, it could have destroyed me. When I learned that this sabotage was motivated by a clause in our parents' will, a clause that awards the bulk of the family inheritance to the more financial, wise, successful daughter, it could have made me give up. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. My parents' faces went pale. Jessica's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of horrified disbelief. But instead, I said, looking directly at her, it lit a fire under me. It made me realize that the only person's validation I needed was my own. It taught me that success isn't just about building a great product. It's about building a life of integrity. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you for showing me exactly the kind of person I never want to be. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then, I picked up my phone from the table. Just before dinner tonight, I got a call from a junior partner at Blackwood Capital. David, who had been frozen, visibly flinched at the name of the firm. He wanted to let me know that after an internal review prompted by some new information, they were officially passing on your condo development project. He said, and I quote, "We can't, in good conscience, partner with individuals who engage in unethical, anti-familial behavior for financial gain." He also mentioned something about reputational risk. Jessica's face was ashen. She looked at David, who was staring at me, his mouth slightly agape. He looked utterly defeated. I raised my glass high. So, a final toast to the truth. It always comes out in the end. Cheers. I took a sip of my champagne and sat down. The silence was deafening. No one knew what to say. My father was staring at my mother, whose hand was over her mouth. My aunts and uncles were studiously avoiding looking at anyone. The perfect family facade had been shattered into a million pieces. Jessica stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She didn't say a word. She just grabbed her purse and walked out of the room, with David trailing numbly behind her. My work was done. The truth, in all its ugly glory, was out. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't cried. I had simply presented the facts. And the facts had been more devastating than any emotional outburst could ever be. Chapter 7: The Aftermath and the Ascent. The immediate aftermath of the party was a strange, hollow silence. No one approached me. My parents seemed to be in a state of shock, speaking to each other in hushed, urgent whispers before leaving without saying goodbye to me. The rest of the family dispersed quickly, avoiding eye contact, as if the truth I'd revealed was a contagious disease. I left the restaurant alone, but for the first time in my adult life, being alone didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. The next few days were a cascade of consequences. The first call was from Ben. "I heard what happened," he said, a note of awe in his voice. "You actually did it. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay, Ben," I told him, and I meant it. "I'm free." The second call was from my mother. She was crying. It was a messy, disjointed conversation filled with apologies and excuses. "We never meant for that will to cause such poison," she sobbed. "We were just trying to be responsible, to protect what your father and I built." "By making your daughters compete for your love and money?" I asked, my voice not unkind but firm. "You created the environment for this to happen, Mom. You pitted us against each other, and you consistently chose to see her ambition as success and my ambition as a flaw. You need to think about that." I told her I needed space, and for once, she seemed to understand. My father sent me a short, stilted email a week later, saying he was deeply disappointed in the entire situation and that they were revisiting their estate planning. It was a start. Jessica, predictably, did not handle her public downfall with grace. I heard through the family grapevine that she and David were in serious trouble. The collapse of the Blackwood Capital deal had a domino effect, scaring off their other potential investors. They were over-leveraged and facing financial ruin. The perfect life they had built on a foundation of arrogance was crumbling. Jessica sent me a single, vitriolic text message filled with blame and threats. I read it, deleted it, and blocked her number. She was no longer a part of my story. With the family drama settling into a new, fractured reality, I turned all my focus back to what truly mattered: my work, my future, my ascent. Streamline continued to grow at an explosive rate. We were featured in several more publications, and the name Carolyn Vance became synonymous with innovation and resilience in the tech world. The success was sweeter than I ever could have imagined, not because it was a weapon against my family, but because it was entirely my own. I had built it not just from code and capital, but from my own strength and determination. About 3 months after the anniversary party, I received an unexpected email. It was from Julian Croft at Northgate Ventures. He asked for a meeting. I was hesitant, but I agreed. We met at a coffee shop, and he was direct and refreshingly honest. "Ms. Vance," he said after we ordered, "I owe you an apology. I pride myself on sound judgment, and in your case, my judgment was compromised. I allowed a personal relationship to cloud my professional assessment. What your sister did was unethical, and I was a fool for not seeing it for what it was. We missed out on what is clearly a game-changing company because of it." He then made me an offer that stunned me. Northgate wanted to lead my next round of funding, Series A, at a valuation that was triple what I had been hoping for. "We want to be in business with you, Carolyn," he said. "We want to invest in you." I took a moment, savoring the irony. The very firm that Jessica had turned against me was now begging to be a part of my success. It was the ultimate vindication. I told him I would consider his offer. That evening, I walked through my new office space. We had moved out of my apartment and into a bright, airy loft downtown with a dozen employees. I stood by the large window, looking out at the city lights. The anger and hurt that had fueled me for so long were gone. In their place was a quiet, powerful confidence. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal and had not only survived but thrived. I had rewritten my own narrative. I was not the family failure. I was the architect of my own life. I eventually accepted Northgate's offer, on my own terms. My parents and I began a slow, tentative process of rebuilding our relationship based on a new foundation of honesty and mutual respect. I never spoke to Jessica again. Her absence in my life was not a void, but a clean, open space where healthier things could grow. My story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclamation. It's about taking the labels people try to stick on you, failure, dreamer, not enough, and burning them for fuel. My sister tried to erase my smile, but in the end, the only thing she erased was herself from my life. And my new smile, the one I wear every day, is genuine, earned, and completely, unshakably mine.